Chapter 26. The Last One. Part 2. The battle was ongoing, and ever intense as both parties attempted to outplay the other. It had been well over a few minutes since the battle began, but it didn't seem like either side was getting the upper hand. An explosion erupted as devastating attack swept through the premises. An orange blur whipped through the air with expanding Rasengans in each hand, and attempted to impale the chakra spheres against Madara. Naruto only ended up phasing through the enemy, hitting a boulder behind him, and causing another explosion to occur. Madara, quick to find Naruto off guard, tried to grab him, only to have Kakashi step in with Kamui to counter the grab that the Madara was trying to do. Frustrated, Naruto activated his Rinnegan and concentrated the chakra in his hand, forming another Rasengan. Then using his right hand, he concentrated another attack, but this one was different. Smirking, Naruto pulled Madara towards him with Bensho Tenin, completely taking him by surprise before Naruto attempted to plunge the Rasengan within his gut. Naruto, thinking he won, only found that his hand fell through Madara and completely missed him. This window of opportunity didn't go unnoticed by Madara as he attempted to catch Naruto again, only for Paper Shuriken to fly towards him and make him go transparent. Naruto jumped back to take a breather. "Thanks, Konan-chan. That was a hairy situation." Naruto yelled over to his teammate as he landed next to her on a boulder. She only sighed before responding, "Naruto, please be more aware of what you're doing." Paper fluttered around her as she created wings and lifted herself off of the ground. "So, you think you're going to win this time, Konan?" Madara replied evilly, "You should have just died and succumbed to your failures, but I guess I'll put you in your place again." Konan lowered her eyes as she focused her jutsu. Her paper started to swirl around her as she gathered her chakra. She knew that she couldn't surprise him with the moves that she already showed him. She knew they wouldn't work as well the second time, but she needed to do something in order to help Naruto at any cost. Naruto was having a rough time trying to even hit Madara at all, so it was understandable that they needed to work together to get to him. Konan's eyes widened as she flew over to Naruto in haste. She had a plan, but she didn't know if it would work. "This is what I want us to do. I have a plan, but you're going to have to make more Rasengans and clones." "Oh, that's easy. Okay, I need you to make those clones. I'm going to substitute some of your clones with clones of my own, but make them explosive paper clones. I don't think that we will be able to hit him unless we surprise him with something he wouldn't suspect." Naruto's grin widened as he gave the thumbs up. "That sounds like a good idea. Let's do it." Madara watched curiously as Naruto threw up the hand signs for the shadow clone jutsu and created what seemed to be around 50 clones. Half created Rasengans, while the other half helped them. Then, they all started to charge forward towards the masked man. He only scoffed as he went to dodge the simple attacks. Once the attacks went through, however, the other clones that came close suddenly exploded, catching Madara by surprise and hitting him with brunt force for the first two explosions. The rest of the explosions were ignored by the man through his transparency jutsu. "Yes!" Naruto shouted loudly, "We finally got a hit." Smoke was billowing from the location where Madara was standing. No one could see through the smoke and were waiting anxiously to see if anything was done to the man. Once the smoke started to clear, Madara's mask broke from his face. The mask fell into several broken pieces from the impact of the explosions that caught him off guard. He looked towards the people in front of him with great distaste. Everything went black for Kakashi as he looked at the enemy's face. Memories of times long gone resurfaced and hit him with emotions that he never wanted to feel while he was fighting. This is a war. But he knew what he was gazing upon wasn't just something that was chance. He very well knew that this person that was standing before him shouldn't be alive. "Obito?" The man in question looked back at him in slight confusion before he smiled devilishly. "Oh, you mean you recognize this face? Sorry, but I'm not Obito. This body came in handy whenever my body decided to give out. Didn't I tell you before? My name is Madara Uchiha." Kakashi, shocked by this sudden news, looked on in horror. In front of him stood a ghost from the past, a friend who had died many years, yet here he was, standing in front of him. Then it all began to click. He said, regaining his composure, "You're using Obito's body as a vessel? You're a slow one, aren't you?" Madara said, smirking, "Yes, I found this body years ago near my hideout. A young Uchiha child left in a coma. Of course, I had some help with the mind transfer." Kakashi clenched his hands. You're using my old friend's body for your benefit?" His features hardened. His Sharingan flared to life, someone who spread nothing but positivity, someone who wanted to become Hokage. His teeth clenched behind his mask. "You're using his body and his image, and bastardizing everything he stood for." Naruto looked back at his sensei. One who was showing a new side he's never witnessed before. Kakashi-sensei, never in my life have I ever wanted to defeat someone as badly as I do now, Kakashi said. He looked over to Naruto. Naruto, let's finish him. Madara didn't like the way that Kakashi was looking at him. He had this certain fire in his gaze that just made him angry. He didn't know why, but he knew that he needed to get more serious as well. The battle between Naruto and Madara continued with Konan being a good support to Naruto, who needed all of the help he could get. Kakashi used Kamui once or twice against Madara, but it seemed to not do much as he just either ignored it or cancelled it out with his phasing. Guy felt useless, but only because he was waiting to be used or for an opening. Yamato would use his wood jutsu against Madara to try and capture him, but he would easily evade it or phase through the wood with his jutsu. Konan eyed Madara studiously as she watched his jutsu that he kept using over and over again. There was something about the way that he was using it that was giving her something that she knew, but she just didn't know what it was. Her mind kept thinking back on the times that he used those moves against her and how they sucked up all of her papers in a swirling fury. It was the time she first attempted to end Madara's life. She barely escaped with her life too in that moment, but she was always watching. She noticed something. It was slowly starting to set in. Suddenly, it hit her. Her eyes widened in amazement as she glanced between Madara and Kakashi. She felt so dumb. Why didn't she think of this earlier? Konan flew in a frenzy of paper over to Kakashi, who was barely hanging on, but still able to fight. His regular eye watched her frantic movement. Curious to her coming his way, he said, "Do you have another plan?" Actually, Konan started with a mischievous grin, "I do." Wasting no time, Konan created a paper clone that flew towards Naruto as quickly as it could. While the clone flew off, Konan began, "Both of you have the same jutsu. Your Kamui could be useful in landing a successful and devastating attack on Madara. It's just a theory, but I realized that you are using the same eyes. It's possible that you're using the same dimensional shift and in close proximity. If that's the case, then we could land an attack on him when he phases to this other plane that he keeps sending his body to." Kakashi looked down in thought, but was highly interested in this new plan that was made. He wasn't that far off from thinking something like this himself. "Okay, I would like to try it, but I do not currently have enough chakra to support another Kamui attack, at least not for the next 15 minutes. "Not to worry," Konan mentioned while watching the fight between Naruto and Madara, and watching her clone get closer to them, "I'm already a step ahead. Madara won't know what hit him." Naruto was busy trying to at least land an attack on the man in front of him, but nothing was working. Every time he tried to use a Rasengan, or tried to use taijutsu against him, he would either evade, or use his transparency to avoid it. It didn't help that he kept grabbing at Naruto at any chance he got. Naruto definitely didn't want him touching anywhere on his body. "Naruto." Naruto looked behind him and saw Konan rapidly approaching. Once she got closer, she whispered something to him, never taking her eyes off of Madara. Naruto didn't know what to do with the information, but he smiled knowing the gist of what to do. His hand signs went up again, and he created more clones. Madara rolled his eyes at the constant clone bother that he always had. He knew that there was some plan that was being made, but he didn't know what exactly they were doing. Madara saw as all of the clones ran to him and tried to all surround him. They developed a man-made wall and ran towards Madara at full speed. Suddenly, more clones came forward with Rasengan in their hands and tried once again to attack Madara with them. Konan waited for Naruto as he got closer to Madara with his clones. Suddenly, Kakashi felt a strong pulse of power surge through his body. A chakra cloak erupted from his body and surprised him. "So, this is what you meant by thinking one step ahead." Madara rolled his eyes at the constant clone bother that he always had. He knew that there was some plan that was being made, but he didn't know what exactly they were doing. Madara saw as all of the clones ran to him and tried to all surround him. They developed a man-made wall and ran towards Madara at full speed. Suddenly, more clones came forward with Rasengan in their hands and tried once again to attack Madara with them. Konan waited for Naruto as he got closer to Madara with his clones. Suddenly, Kakashi felt a strong pulse of power surge through his body. A chakra cloak erupted from his body and surprised him. "So, this is what you meant by thinking one step ahead." Konan didn't say anything as she watched the fight that was going on ahead of her. Without thinking, she created a paper clone that made an exact copy of her. That clone waited patiently as the barrage started pummeling upon Madara and his phasing started. They watched intensely, observing every moment that Madara phased through attacks. "Now, Kamui!" Kakashi shouted as his Sharingan spun into a Mangekyo. Konan's clone got sucked into the vortex, quickly disappearing from their world that they were in. Suddenly, Madara exploded from his position, knocking him backwards and towards the ground in a deathly slam. He rolled a few times before readjusting himself. Blood seemed to pour from his mouth as he clenched his red-soaked teeth at the other ninja before him. I see. So, you know of my secret. It wasn't hard, Conan replied stoically. Use something again and again, and eventually, someone will know how you do it. Madara looked at his right arm, which was once again lost from the explosion that happened. He didn't expect to be caught in his other dimension. This made teleportation harder to deal with. He couldn't phase anymore, because if he did, they would just use Kakashi again and cause another explosion to occur. He couldn't let that happen. Looks like I'm going to have to use the 10 tails early. Madara swiftly ran over to the Jito statue, surprising everyone that was fighting him. Conan widened her eyes as she got an idea of what he was doing. Naruto! Conan shouted in haste. Naruto got the hint and dashed towards Madara in an attempt to prevent him from reaching the statue. Without warning, a hand grips Naruto's arm, catching him by surprise before he gets a kick to the stomach and the wind knocked out of him. He flipped on the ground and stuck his landing while looking up. His teeth grit as someone he didn't want to see came to him with a big smirk plastered on his face. Sasuke, did you really think that Madara wouldn't have other plans to stop you? Sasuke said with a chuckle, I'm not going to let you interfere with Madara's plan. I will chase you, so don't run away now. Naruto clenched his fist as Sasuke ran to him on the offense and started attacking him. There were so many things that Naruto wanted to say to Sasuke, but apparently, those were going to have to wait. Sasuke seemed more focused on fighting him rather than talking. Conan saw as Sasuke attacked Naruto and kept him from going after Madara. Shit. I didn't expect this. I'm going to have to move on ahead. Gai-san. Yamato-san. Follow me. I'll need your help. Kakashi can help Naruto, if he needs to. We have to stop Madara from using the statue. We don't know what will happen if we let him use it. They both nodded their heads as they dashed towards the direction that Madara ran off to. Conan was determined to make sure that Madara doesn't execute his plan. Sweat began to bead from her head as she thought of the problems that could arise if she didn't get to it in time. Madara already had a head start. Conan watched as Madara ran through ninja and evaded them easily and killed some in the process as they ran to try and catch up to him. Conan fluttered forward with her paper and began to catch up. Madara noticed this and smirked at her insistence. He stopped rapidly, bringing his free hand to her and hitting her in the chest with an unknown pressure that sent her flying away from him and hitting a boulder before falling unconscious. Madara chuckled as he continued to dart through the ninja that seemed to fill his vision, but he was one step closer to the statue. He looked behind him and grunted in frustration as he saw both Yamato and Guy trailing behind him. He couldn't afford to be risky anymore. He needed to get to the statue as quickly as possible. While Naruto was fighting Sasuke, he felt a sudden urge to look over to Conan and saw her knocked unconscious against a boulder. Conan-chan. He made a couple of clones that immediately left the area and went for Tsunade and Conan. He couldn't stop fighting as Sasuke kept up his barrage of attacks that left no room for Naruto to move forward or surprise him. Sasuke was fighting Naruto while he was weakened, and Naruto didn't feel it was fair. Sasuke had a full supply of chakra and strength. I really hope that Conan-chan is okay. Present time. Conan was sitting as Tsunade continued to heal her. She was currently going over her plans to defeat Madara and keep him from reaching whatever goals he's aspiring to achieve. She knew that waiting idly while he continued to head towards the statue would cause problems. It didn't help that she was already unconscious for a few minutes, which gave him even more time. She thought about what she did wrong. She knew better than to rush Madara like that while he was running. Even though he had one arm, Conan got too cocky and thought she had the upper hand. She didn't realize just how much of a power gap there was between her and him. Naruto was the only one able to keep up with him alone. She doubted that she could do anything without Naruto's or someone else's help. Even though she was planning how to approach Madara and how he functioned, she still couldn't grasp the new powers that he seemed to achieve while she was in Konoha. Suddenly, she felt an ominous feeling that made her sweat with anxiety. She knew something was starting to happen. She could feel it. She didn't know how, but she could feel something going horribly wrong. Her mind forced her shakily up to her feet. What are you doing? I'm sorry, Tsunade-sama. I can't wait anymore. Something is happening, and I need to be there. I have to stop it. Tsunade was shocked at the woman's sudden urge to head toward the fight. If I don't heal you properly, then you could become a hindrance. You could die. Conan contemplated silently for a few moments before she spoke softly. That may very well be so, but I can't have Madara follow through with his plan. Not when everyone is trying their best. Not when we're so close. Conan looked back to Tsunade with a sad smile. Naruto-kun needs me. I have to help put a stop to this once and for all. Tsunade sighed as she stood up. She knew that the woman seemed to have her mindset on this, and she couldn't change her mind. Okay. I'll follow you back to the battlefield then. Just don't be reckless. Don't worry. I have a plan. Conan bit into her thumb and threw her palm into the ground, summoning Jutsu. A large cloud of smoke billowed as a giant toad appeared in front of both of the women. Seeing the toad suddenly summoned by Conan, surprised Sanada to no end. Toad, you can summon toads. Conan smiled with pensive breath as she nodded to Sanada. Yes, I've been to Mount Maiboku. It's a nice place. Hey, girlie. The large red toad with a cigar in his mouth yelled down to her. I see that you're using us for the first time. Any reason that you need my help? Yes, I'm sorry for suddenly summoning you, but we need to quickly travel to that statue that you can see in the distance. Conan shouted. Gamakichi looked around before spotting something over a couple of hills. Ah. I see it. Hop on both of you. I'll get us there in a jiffy. Both Conan and Sanada looked at each other and got on the toad in haste before it hopped off with great speed. Its jumps were far faster than what they could do by foot. Sanada was even more impressed as she watched the woman that was before her. She didn't know what to think, but she knew that Naruto saw something in her after all. Sanada smiled in acceptance. Naruto made a good call. His luck was always better than mine anyway. Madara made it to the statue without much interference. The Kage stood in surprise seeing Madara standing before the statue. They'd been trying to destroy it for the past 20 minutes, but nothing they did affected it in the slightest. Madara summoned something that contained parts of the last two Biju and threw them into the mouth of the statue. The statue roared as it started its evolutionary change. Madara chuckled darkly to everyone that stood around him. They took precautionary steps back as the statue continued to wreak havoc on everyone's ears. They didn't know what it was doing, but they knew that it couldn't be good. They were afraid to move forward because they didn't know if it would explode or swipe at them the instant they get close to it. What do we do? Madame Izakage asked to the other Kage who stood around her. They couldn't figure out how to deal with this giant idol, and it didn't help that things got progressively worse once Madara got there. Gaara didn't know what to do. Having Madara here complicated things even more. Where is Naruto? That was a question that seemed to repeat. Madara was here, but Naruto was not. Was he defeated? Gaara doubted it. He must have been distracted by something else. Gaara began to sweat as he tried to decide what to do. Without Naruto here, I don't know how we are going to handle this situation. It seems we have been given a very difficult task. They could try to hit it harder, but no matter what they've done to it so far, they haven't even scratched it. They don't know why, but nothing they tried worked. A ran his lightning through the statue to try and break through with his speed and cutting ability, but his hand got stuck while trying to push through. The skin of the Jitomazu was very tough. Suddenly, Yamato came to everyone's aid as he tried to summon large wood structures. He created wooden beams to contain the thing that was turning into something dangerous. The wood pushed the thing, but it didn't want to budge. It actually was bowing outwards. He held on for dear life, but the statue was so strong that the beams cracked and broke in many places. He ran out of options as well. Everyone get out of the way. Everyone turned to see Tsunade and Conan running towards the statue. A giant toad followed behind them as they took stances. Mr. Toad, could you please destroy the statue that's shouting? It's Gamakichi. The toad told her. Sure, let me see if I can do something about it. The toad swiped against the statue, but the sword barely made a dent. It stopped dead in its tracks in the skin of the statue. What the? That's some strong stuff. He pulled his sword out and sheathed it again. I'm sorry, girlie, but that statue is pretty much unbreakable. I can't seem to dig into it at all. Okay, I'm sorry for wasting your time. Thank you for your help. You can go now. Conan, shocked at the strength of the statue, quickly thought of another plan, while the toad disappeared in a puff of smoke. She knew that this plan was going to drain her chakra, but she had to try something different, and they didn't have a lot of time to handle this. Everyone, get back. I'm going to try something else. Everyone ran backwards in an effort to get away from it as Conan began to flutter her paper. Paper erupted from her body in every direction. Thousands turned into millions and millions turned into billions as the papers fluttered and formed a cocoon dome that covered the statue, completely sealing it from the outside. The screams of the statue were muffled by the paper as Conan continued applying more papers to the jutsu. Are those? She's planning to blow that thing up. Get back. Sanada said to everyone as they watched in amazement at the sheer amount of paper that continued to flow towards the statue. After a few minutes, Conan slowly began to stop supplying papers to the dome as the papers that fluttered around her began to take shape into her form again. She looked at the dome that she created and lowered her eyes in resentment. Madara was caught in the jutsu as well, so she knew that she had trapped him at least temporarily. Madara, this was your undoing. You greatly underestimated everyone here, including me. You thought we were going to go down without a fight. Did you expect us all to lie down and die? Conan looked angrily at the dome. Meet version 2 of my 600 billion explosive tag jutsu. The last time you were in my jutsu, you survived by using the Izanagi. Now, you only have one Sharingan. Can you risk it this time? Conan didn't waste time as he touched a paper explosive. It started a chain eruption that began blowing the inside of the cocoon to smithereens. Roars from the statue were audible as the destruction continued to devastate whatever was inside. Everyone was watching as the explosions kept occurring. The statue stopped roaring after a few minutes into the destruction. Conan smiled as she watched the dome intensely for any strange behavior. The only downside to version 2 is that it only lasts 6 minutes compared to version 1, which was 10 minutes, but the explosions are more intense and more compact than the first version by stacking papers in sets of twos. After another couple of minutes, the explosion stopped. The dome created from paper was on fire, but still standing from its attack. Conan was breathing heavily from the attack and felt weak from chakra loss. She fell to her knees as she tried to gain her bearings. That attack always drains her chakra and stamina. She knew it would be hard to move for the next few minutes. People began to cheer as they saw the dome on fire and the statue that was inside went quiet earlier. People were thanking Conan and giving her praise. Conan felt relieved after feeling the peace finally register in her head. She finally did it. Suddenly, there was a burning sensation on her stomach. Conan's eyes widened as she looked down. A long black rod ran through her stomach and out from her back. She looked up and noticed the rod came from the dome that she created. Coughs erupted from her lungs and her hands ran to her mouth as she tried to contain the cough to no avail. Shocked, Conan gazed upon the cocoon and saw Madara ripping himself free of the paper. His eyes stared darkly at Conan. He's still. Conan didn't have much time as Madara rushed her and grabbed her by the head. All of the other ninja were shocked as Conan was trying to fight for her life in his grasp. She couldn't break free, and it was hard to talk from the coughing that erupted because of her stab wound. Madara had a different look. He was more gray and had a scaly appearance. He had 2 tendrils that seemed to form on his lower back and 1 horn was placed on his head. His Sharingan eye was closed, but the Rinnegan still stared intensely back at her. You shouldn't have done that. The rod that he was using turned sharp again and began to stab her many times over. Conan's pain was indescribable. Her teeth gnashed as she screamed from each stab that sliced through her stomach. Others' mouths opened agape at the vicious scene that played before them. They couldn't believe that someone would be so ruthless. After he felt satisfied, he dumped her body on the ground as he looked on to others that were staring at him with either fear or nervousness. He looked down again at Conan and grunted, I should have just killed you when I killed your parents. I should have realized how much of a nuisance you would have become. Too late to worry about things long past, I suppose. Conan's eyes widened as she heard his confession. Tears started to well in her eyes as she blinked to staunch the tears. The sudden revelation took her by surprise, but she couldn't do anything. Her limp body didn't move, except for the heaving that she did while crying. Madara looked down at her pitiful state before he looked onwards to the other ninja that were preparing to fight him. His eyes darkened as he slowly spread his arms forward. One held the black staff. Shall we begin, Naruto POV? Naruto was in the middle of fighting Sasuke when suddenly, a grave feeling hit his gut. This one actually scared him. He could feel Conan's life fading away. No. Sasuke smirked as he caught an idea of what happened. Well, looks like I did my job. You should have been better, Naruto. You couldn't save Sakura and now you can't even save that other woman. You're pathetic. Naruto grunted in frustration at the new information that he was being hit with. Sasuke laughed at his misfortune. Go ahead, Naruto. Go see her and see what you've done. Go see someone else that you couldn't save. I won't even stop you. I want you to be in agony. Maybe then you could actually understand only a fraction of my loss. Naruto dashed off in the direction that he felt Conan was located. His emotions were unstable. He knew that something bad happened. He knew that it had something to do with Madara, but he couldn't do anything until he could stop fighting with Sasuke. Now that Sasuke let him go, he charged at full speed. He went so fast that the air stung his eyes, but he couldn't stop. He had to see Conan and make sure she stays safe. She couldn't die. Not like this. Just as quickly as he was thinking these things, he ran upon the scene before him. Madara was wreaking havoc on the other ninja in the distance. There were many explosions going off and a lot of screaming, but Naruto could tell that this was becoming a bloodbath. Naruto. He stopped once he saw the blue-haired angel laying on the ground in a crumpled-up mess. Naruto's heart broke as he walked over to her. His lip quivered when he saw her tiredly look at him. Her eyes lost all of the fire that they had before. They were hazed over and almost void of life. Her lips gushed blood from the sides. Her abdomen was a deepened shade of red. Many thoughts were rushing in Naruto's head as he picked her up gingerly. He took slow steps as he gazed down to her face. He needed to place her somewhere that wasn't out in the open. Naruto-kun, I'm sorry, Naruto teared up from her words alone. He was holding it in, but they were getting harder and harder to resist. Don't say anything now, Konan-chan. Naruto-kun, she started again, only for Naruto to have visible tear streaks running down his eyes. I realized now why I was kept alive. Everything, it's all so clear to me now. Naruto didn't want to hear these things, but he knew that Konan wanted to say something. Don't talk like you're dying, Konan-chan. I will find someone to heal you. Naruto-kun, listen to me, Konan said, getting his attention. I was here so I could protect you. The prophetic one. I taught you everything I know about the Rinnegan. Konan's breaths were haggard, but she still continued. I gave you a power to defeat the darkness. After a few moments of silence, while Naruto walked, Konan smiled. You changed me, Naruto-kun. You gave me a second chance to redeem myself. I was only glad to help you, Naruto-kun, because you really were the prophetic one after all. Naruto's eyes lowered in guilt and remorse. The shine that they seemed to have faded as he continued listening to her. Now, I can follow my friends, hopefully. But, at least I can die, knowing that I, Konan Senju, helped save the world. He looked down to her eyes as she looked back up to him. Her blood-stained hands slowly pressed against his chest. Her eyesight moved slowly to his chest. Konan chuckled faintly. What's so funny, Konan-chan? Naruto asked, saddened. Do you know, maybe, if things were different, I could have. Konan got really quiet. Naruto's lip quivered again as he started to cry. His tears dripped upon Konan as he walked to a boulder that he found and placed her sitting up against it. His audible cry echoed as a cloud overhead started pouring light rain. His tears were drowned out by the rainfall as he looked downwards to the ground. He didn't know what to say. After all of this time, Konan, who he had grown attached to, slipped away and left him alone. His heart was hurting, and he gripped it tightly as he thought about all of his memories with her. He recalled her annoyance at some of his shenanigans. He remembered when they ate together and how she would have conversations with him. He remembered how she started to laugh and joyously react to him. All of those things were now gone. His hand curled tightly into a fist. His nails dug into his palms, causing them to bleed. He knew what he had to do. He couldn't let it end this way. He rubbed his eyes and hardened his gaze. He leered towards his enemy in the distance. His feet increased in speed. His anger and sadness was hitting deep in his stomach, and there was nothing that could quell that rage. Konan didn't deserve this. Don't worry, Konan-chan. I promise, Naruto started as he arched his eyebrows. He steeled his resolve and wanted to work that much harder to defeat Madara. Your death won't be in vain.
End of chapter 26.